We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
This is a very interesting question.
The Bub Report with Dr. Kellon Bub. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Tell us, a commissioner of police, tell a politician, back off. You have no knowledge of the law. You have no knowledge of law enforcement. You cannot force my officers to do the wrong thing.
But that is somebody's son. That is somebody's child. That is part of a family. And I think that is the part that they are missing out.
Because E and F are apt to be used oppressively.
It's like because we don't see disabled people as sexual beings, which is ridiculous.
You mean they don't want to listen to your version of science? They have their own science. You have your science.
What we need to do is teach people to think and not what to think.
Today, it's too bad that everybody do what they want.
If I could forgive Bernard Ford, then I could forgive Maurice too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did.
The education system has to be very fluid and dynamic because we're living in very different and changing times.
Treating all your citizens equally, all your citizens fairly, recognizing each group, not discriminating against one or the other.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah. Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just keep quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this. So I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October 20th edition of the Bub Report. I am your humble host, Dr. Kellon Bub. Now, if you're joining us on Facebook, please do us a favor by sharing this week's live stream And for those of you over at YouTube, do us a favor by liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Of course, you can catch a repeat episode of this week's edition of the Bub Report both on WPG-10 television tonight at 8 p.m. as well as on GBN television on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Your engagement with our YouTube page causes us to grow and reach a wider audience. And now for this week's editorial. At Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell's recently held press conference, he revealed that his unexpected and unplanned trip to one of our ancestral homes in the motherland of Nigeria was paid for by Africa's richest man, an oil magnate, Akino Dangote. The Dangote refinery, owned by the man with a net worth of just over 27 billion US dollars, is the biggest single oil refinery in the world and one of the most complex, capable of processing most global crude oil types. It also has the potential to transform Nigeria's economy by making the country self-reliant for fuel. And it's more than doubled his net worth to over 27 billion US dollars, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Now, while one ought not to downplay the significance of the Grenadian leader engaging with a non-European entrepreneur or an entrepreneur from North America, we cannot help but think of the potential conflict of interest issues that can arise from accepting a gift from a potential investor. This recent sojourn by Prime Minister Mitchell harkens back to a time when his predecessor also accepted the gift of airfare from potential European investors. The year was 2000, and Dr. Mitchell embarked upon a multi-nation tour of Europe and Kuwait to drum up foreign investment support for Grenada. At the time, Dr. Mitchell explained that the trip was funded in part by some of his hosts, including the vaunted Eric Steiner, in the famous alleged $500,000 briefcase bribe affair. Dr. Mitchell indicated back then that he only received, quote, approximately 15,000 US dollars, unquote, from the fraudster as reimbursement for the Switzerland leg of the trip, whereas his foes claimed to have had a tape showing otherwise. The trip caused the administration to set up the Cheltenham Commission of Inquiry in 2004. The former Grenadian ambassador to Brussels, Joan Marie Coutain, who accompanied Mitchell on that trip to St. Maurice, Switzerland, told the inquiry that she was with the Prime Minister at the time and did not see him collect any money from Steiner. The briefcase episode was perhaps the forerunner to Grenada's Integrity in Public Life Act, which states in Section 2, Part A, subsection B as follows, quote, within 7 days, report any gifts or rewards accepted by him or her in the course of the performance of his or her official functions. And there, the Integrity in Public Life Act is speaking to the conduct of elected officials in government. The Act also states, quote, it requires that all gifts be reported to the Commission. It is an offense for a person in public life to accept any gift from any person, either as an inducement for any official act to be done by him or her, or as a reward for any official act done by him or her, unquote. So in the context of Mitchell's promotional trip to the motherland, should the Commission issue an opinion on determining whether the current Prime Minister is in breach of elements of the Integrity in Public Life Act? Is the Integrity in Public Life Act clear on whether or not a complimentary foreign trip constitutes a gift? And while we watched this space, it was also a quite surprising revelation to learn of the appointment of retired magistrate Teddy St. Louis as the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister. Had journalist Linda Straker not asked the question, this information might not have been known by the national community up to the point of that press conference. We will continue to watch this space. Folks, this is the Bub Report We will be right back with our first guest, Martine Powers, who will share with us some recent findings from the U.S. Army on the whereabouts of the remains of Maurice Bishop and his fallen colleagues. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's episode of the Bub Report. Now, the empty grave of Comrade Bishop investigated the national mystery on its own terms by drawing the voices of people most affected by the death and the assassination of Maurice Bishop and his fallen colleagues back in 1983. Now, the podcast interviewed family members of the victims, as well as other Grenadians who lived through the era. The series presented an impressive trove of archival material, elucidating the ever-relevant international stakes of American imperialism and Black liberation. For her work, Martine Powers and her team at the Washington Post won a Peabody Award for weaving an intimate chronicle of this pivotal and enduring chapter in Grenadian and Caribbean history. But in the last 72 hours, since the release of the podcast series, Powers and her team was able to get more information from the U.S. Army. And of course, she's joining us today to share that information with us on the Bub Report. Martine, welcome back to the Bub Report. This is, of course, your second time with us, and we're happy that you can join us this week.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. It's actually my third time.
Your third time. There you go.
Yeah,
We've had so many guests.
Basically an old hat.
You are. But Martine, talk to us about this report that the U.S. Army published. And of course, we had a conversation on Thursday about this. They published that on, I'm not sure when the letter was published.
Well, it only came out on Friday. Well, we published it on Friday. This is news that we put out there just like a day and a half ago. So
right. Yes, absolutely. So tell us what spawned or what inspired this new report. Did the U.S. Army get wind of the podcast series that you were conducting?
Well, I'll give you my understanding of how this came about. As you know, this is something that Grenadians have been asking for a long time, that they wanted the U.S. to take seriously these concerns that the U.S. may have somehow been involved in the disappearance of the remains of Maurice Bishop and of the other people who died alongside him in 1983. And so there had been various requests made to the government, to the American government over the years. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who, she'd spent time in Grenada in the early 80s before she was a congresswoman. She was particularly interested in this. She had been sending letter after letter to the Defense Department, and according to her, she said she wasn't really getting a response. And what we know about the timing is basically that Barbara Lee sent a letter last October for the 40th anniversary saying, again, we want some answers. And then our podcast series came out between October and December of last year. And I don't want to go too far in saying the causality here, but our podcast series ended in December. And then the next month in January, apparently the U.S. Secretary of the Army decided that the Army would need to launch an investigation, and she assigned a lead investigator who spent 6 months looking for records and coming up with a set of findings according to the Army's document. Actually have a copy of the report here. You can see Defense Department, Secretary of the Army. This is what was sent to Barbara Lee's office. And I can share that on your Facebook page so other people can look at it too. But it's a very interesting report. And I think some people might find it insightful. Some people might find it unsatisfying, but basically the Army lays out, according to its own documents, the set of facts that they believe to have happened in those weeks after Maurice Bishop was killed. And they don't kind of come up with clear conclusions, but the facts that they do lay out in some ways match what we'd reported in the podcast, and I think are still important for people to understand.
Now, were there any points of departure or divergence in respect of that new report from the U.S. Army and what you reported in the podcast? You articulated that, you know, a lot of what you said is not dissimilar, but where are the points of departure?
Yeah, well, I'll try to briefly describe what the findings are and then what we see in some of those points of departure. So basically, the U.S. is laying out a set of facts that suggest that they, or at least their facts point to this idea that Bishop and the remains of the other people who were with him, that they ended up in St. George's Cemetery, that basically that the U.S. encountered these remains in Calavini, that they exhumed them, they recovered them, they took them first to a kind of remains collection point at Point Salines, and then they took them to St. SGU for a forensic exam. They say they tried to identify these bodies for various reasons. They were not able to identify these bodies. Those bodies get turned over to funeral home, and then after that, they are buried in St. George's Cemetery in an unmarked grave. So that's one kind of series of facts that we'd outlined as a potential in the podcast. And the Army doesn't say explicitly, we believe the bodies are now in the cemetery, but the fact that these are the findings that they outline suggests to me that they're putting that out as like what they believe to have happened. At the same time, though, we've heard these conflicting accounts that this report does not engage with. And I know you've talked about this in the past on your show, but there is this Jamaican military intelligence officer named Earl Brown, who we were able to track down.
That's the Brigadier General who you interviewed, yes, for the podcast.
No, he's a corporal.
Corporal.
Yeah. But so he'd given this account in court here in Grenada shortly after 1983, and he said this over the years. He said it to the Presentation Brothers College boys who came to interview him back in, I think, 1999 or 2000. But basically, this military intelligence officer says, look, I was with the Americans when they exhumed these bodies, and according to my memory, Maurice Bishop's body was there and it was identifiable. And if the U.S. military says that they had this body but they couldn't identify it, then that's not true. And so that's in direct opposition with what the U.S. Army is saying in this report, where they say, look, we couldn't identify these bodies, and potentially that's why we were not able to come up with a more kind of conclusive sense of who these bodies were. And so the fact that they don't mention that, I mean, the Army, I talked to an Army official who basically says, we weren't trying to go out and interview news sources outside the Army. We were just looking at the records we have. And according to our records, we say that we weren't able to identify these bodies. But, that's a point of tension that this report doesn't deal with. The other one I would point out is that according to our reporting, there does seem to be a lot of evidence that suggests that the U.S. might have inadvertently bombed either the area around where the bodies were originally buried in Calavini, maybe the site where they were actually buried. We have aerial photos from back in 1983 of Calavini where you can see all the bombs, all the bomb blasts everywhere. And again, the Army's report doesn't talk about that, doesn't mention that, doesn't engage with this idea of maybe during Operation Urgent Fury, because they were bombing this part of Calavini, they might have struck these remains, and that could have led to these remains being difficult to identify. So for me, I have a lot more questions after having read this report.
And journalists always do. We always do. So it leaves more questions than answers there. And you just mentioned the bombing here. Did the U.S. go into any other operational aspects of Operation Urgent Fury in the report?
No, I mean, they were very specific, basically focused on this question of, did they have any more information about what happened to Maurice Bishop's remains? That's what they were looking for, as well as how they were treating the recovery of remains generally in Grenada. You know, as you know, lots of people were killed, and they were trying to separate out Grenadian bodies, Cuban bodies, and American bodies. And they say that the conditions for doing that were very difficult, that they didn't have enough people originally who were kind of experts in like how to deal with human remains in the aftermath of a conflict. And so they go into a little bit about that, hazardous conditions, not enough staff. But in terms of some larger questions around Urgent Fury, that was not part of this report.
Mm-hmm. And part of that too, in one of your podcast episodes, I believe it was a corporal, he spoke about the prevailing weather conditions at the time, and also the state of the deterioration of the bodies. Did the report speak to whether or not any type of forensic probe was done by the U.S. Army? Because I do know that your podcast spent a lot of time looking at that forensic aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, as you say, weather deterioration, you know, this was the rainy season. Obviously, it gets really hot during the day. Like, these were not ideal circumstances to have bodies 3 weeks after they had been killed to then try to assess their identity. But what we do know, both from this report and from other documents that we've seen from the U.S. government in the past, is that at some point, these bodies, in early November of 1983, these bodies were taken to SGU, where they were basically taken to the gross anatomy lab, where the med students were doing their anatomy learning. They were taken to this lab, and then the U.S. flew down a forensic team, and they tried to assess the identity of these remains as part of a forensic exam, and they say they were not able to. However, there is evidence to suggest that these were at least some of the bodies, maybe all of the bodies. For example, there are personal items, personal effects from some of the cabinet members who were killed, who were found mixed in with these remains. And so there was evidence to suggest in that moment, like, okay, maybe you can't identify these bodies through bones or teeth, and this was before DNA was used for forensic exams, so they couldn't use DNA at that point. But the fact that there were personal effects in there does suggest that, like, people at the time, might have had some indication that these would be Maurice Bishop's remains, and that even before they were exhumed, they were told by Grenadians, like, look, if you want to find Maurice Bishop's body, this is where it is. We'll take you out there. And so they were operating off the tip, going out there with the impression that these were likely to be Bishop's remains. And so there's a lot of kind of circumstantial stuff that would have suggested before this forensic exam what they might have been dealing with.
Now, you also mentioned in the most recent podcast episode that you released an FBI lead, and that intrigued me a bit, because I'm thinking, of course, that the U.S. Army invasion of Grenada in 1983 was primarily within the domain of the U.S. military. Can you articulate the angle of the Federal Bureau of Investigation here?
Sure. And I don't want to give too much away.
Yes.
But what I will say is that, as part of this investigation that we've been doing, we've been trying to get to the bottom of this mystery around Bishop's remains. But also there are all these questions around what were the interactions of the U.S. government and Grenada before Urgent Fury. I don't think it will surprise your listeners to know that there are all these theories that the U.S. was sending spies into Grenada. That's something that we've been looking into and trying to take into account different accounts of that maybe or maybe not having been the case. And also, as you know, Bishop traveled to the U.S. And he Black Americans and Caribbean Americans found him to be so inspiring. He would do events for the Congressional Black Caucus. He did an event at Hunter College that we know was incredibly memorable. And so we have been trying to get a sense of, like, to what extent was Bishop surveilled while he was in the US? To what extent was the US government like interested in what he was up to while he was in the US? And so that's something else that we've been looking at, and that's kind of where this FBI public records requests get in, gets incorporated. Though I will say, this is I mentioned in the podcast just to say that we have outstanding public records requests. And this is something that I filed a couple years ago and just over the summer heard back, we might have documents, but if you're still interested in them, it's going to be a while before you can get them.
Right, because in what you articulated is that a particular series of permissions need to
a lot of this
be
stuff
requested and granted and all of that. It's caught in that bureaucratic maelstrom that occurs.
Yeah, because so much of this is just sort of blanket classified, right? That like I think if you talk to U.S. officials, a lot of them would say like, we don't really have that much of a national interest in keeping this stuff secret anymore. However, the process of declassifying them, you have to have someone who comes and looks at it and reads through and just make sure that there's nothing in it that they would, that would affect U.S. national security interests right now. And so, I think there's a lot of skepticism around the U.S. government with this, which is totally understandable. And I think a lot of your listeners might be thinking, well, this is part of the U.S. government trying to keep things secret. And I think that's a totally understandable point of view. At the same time, I think a lot of this is also just bureaucracy and the fact that there are these files that people haven't looked at in a long time, and the government has this process that they go through to declassify stuff. And so with this FBI stuff, there's State Department documents that we know exist. There are CIA documents that we know exist. Like, this is all stuff that we hope, if we keep pushing over the coming months and likely years, that more and more of this stuff will be made public. And I think will really provide a lot of insight to people about what was going on in the lead up to Urgent Fury.
Yeah, but because a lot of that information is still classified. Because I attempted many years ago, by way of the Library of Congress, to attempt to find some information. And the librarian there at the Library of Congress indicated that, yes, there is no way you're going to get this. It's classified. I was even saying to her, well, can you see if I can go over to the National Archives in Maryland and see what they can do? She said, no, it's classified. That was what we found there. But outside of disclosing to you their findings, do you know if the U.S. Army, the Secretary of the Army, made any overtures to the government of Grenada on this issue?
Yeah, so our understanding is that they did, and I'm still trying to hear back from the government of Grenada. I reached out to the Prime Minister's office and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I'm still waiting back for details from them on kind of their point of view on things. But our understanding is they sent a letter last month, or that the U.S. Army, the U.S. government sent a letter to the Grenadian government last month outlining a bunch of the same stuff. And then according to the Army, they say that there was a meeting last week or I guess 2 weeks ago now, where the State Department and the Army laid out some of these findings. And so from the U.S. government's point of view, they said that they think it all went really well and that all of this was well received. I don't know that to be the case, having not spoken to the members of the Grenadian government who were in that meeting. And so I'd be really curious to hear from them about what they thought about this, and if they see this as a satisfying answer, or if they see this as just a first step and that there's more that needs to be done to try to unearth some of these answers.
We have a viewer here who is saying, could it be that the U.S. Army is not being transparent and that there's a possibility Maurice Bishop's body is somewhere in the U.S.? After all, they fed his motive and his alliances with Cuba. That is, of course, one of the prevailing narratives in the context of Grenada, yes?
Yeah.
In other words, there was not, and that theme emerged in your reporting on this issue, that they did not want to shrine to Maurice Bishop in the same way they did not want to shrine to Osama bin Laden. Of course, you can't compare Bishop with bin Laden. That's chalk and cheese there. But that's still the overall prevailing feeling among many in the Grenadian society.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a theory that we looked very seriously at, this question of could these remains have been brought back to the U.S.? I'll say that we saw no evidence of that in terms of actual whole remains being brought back. We do know that as part of their forensic testing, they did bring back some tissue samples that that they were using to do testing after the fact because they couldn't do those tests in Grenada. And so we've also been asking these questions around tissue samples here in the US. Do they still exist? The agency that was in charge of this forensic exam no longer exists in the form that it did back in 1983. And so it's been difficult to get clarity there on tissue samples that were taken from this forensic exam. Are they in the US? And if they are, maybe they could currently be used for DNA testing. So that's something that we're still working on. But again, this idea of whole bodies or remains, whole body bags being taken back to the US, that's not our understanding. And I've talked to a couple people who were in that forensic exam who say that's not what we saw. But at the same time, again, I can understand why Grenadians have a lot of wariness and skepticism that the U.S. is being honest about this. And in the report that the Army just did, they responded to some of these questions that Congresswoman Barbara Lee had put out to them. Were documents destroyed as part of this? Was there an intentional effort to kind of obfuscate what happened to Bishop's remains? And this report is insistent no documents were destroyed. There wasn't an attempt to keep it secret. They say that they went back and interviewed members of the Army to get a better sense of this, and that they, those members of the Army said, we weren't, in our view, we didn't find Maurice Bishop's remains, and that nothing was destroyed. But I think, it's the Army investigating itself, right? Doing an internal review.
Correct.
And
yes.
Again, I can understand a sense of wariness around that. And I think that if the U.S. government were really interested in trying to kind of tackle that sense of skepticism, they would maybe bring in outside investigators or have a different agency, looking into this. And that's not what happened here. So I think there are two ways to look at it, right? I think some people will see this as a very significant attempt made by the U.S. government to try to offer some answers. And some people will say, look, this isn't enough, and I don't trust the U.S. government to investigate itself. And, that's one way of looking at it.
But trying to do some crosstabs here, I suspect that there were previous reports that was published by the U.S. government in respect of the operational nature of Operation Urgent Fury. Of course, they would have had to do the work of debrief in respect of what occurred there.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand how this report is any different from what they published before.
Yeah, no, I mean, there have been reports done about Operation Urgent Fury generally, and there have been many of them. I mean, I don't know how much your listeners would know about this, but from the U.S. perspective, Urgent Fury was kind of a defining moment for the U.S. military, frankly, because they messed it up so badly in some ways.
Yes.
And that even from the American point of view, the number of American casualties that they had in Operation Urgent Fury were unacceptable because some people died basically because of miscommunications and accidents. And so this was a moment where the U.S. government was looking back and saying, okay, the invasion of Grenada, what did we do wrong? How could we do this better? So there have been a lot of reports about that. Specifically, the Maurice Bishop body question, I don't think that they have really done a substantive engaging with this question over the years. I mean, shortly after, and this was in 1984, they were asked about this by the Grenadian government, and they gave this response, look, there was this exam. We don't really know what happened with these bodies, but according to us, they weren't identified as Maurice Bishop. And then other than that, we don't have any answers. And then back in 2000, the U.S. government was brought in to help try to identify some bodies that were found in the cemetery that they thought could be Maurice Bishop. The U.S. government sent a couple forensic people down. They said they're clearly not Maurice Bishop. They're not the right age. So, they weren't killed by gunshot wounds. And so we can't really help you. And so that's basically it. And so I do think that this is the first time that they've actively combed through their own records to try to provide some substantive answers. And but this hasn't been a priority for the U.S. government in terms of what they have been reassessing as part of Operation Urgent Fury. Over the years, this just wasn't something that was a priority.
Where does your podcast go from here? In my listening of your most recent episode, you indicated that there will be much more reporting on this. So I'm looking forward, of course, to that FBI bit. And seeing what that looks like.
I'm looking forward to it too. It's something that we're going to keep pushing forward on this. I would be lying if I said like this is all I do every day. I mean, we put out the original podcast series with the intention of telling like a really fulsome story from beginning to end, and we were kind of single-mindedly focused on that for the year, really 2 years that we were working on that. I host a daily news podcast here at the Post, and so basically the Maurice Bishop
priorities.
Stuff it's this is what I do in the time when I'm not talking about the U.S. presidential election or wars in Ukraine or Gaza or what have you. But again, I mean, I think that's part of why this hasn't been a priority for the U.S. government in the past, because there's so much going on in the world. But to me, this story really matters, and it's such a fascinating part of history, part of Caribbean history, part of world history, with these really incredible individuals who've been connected to this era in Grenada's history. And so I don't know if that means that like next October we're going to have another update. I hope that we do. But I do feel like it's just important to keep remembering this.
And of course, we are going to play a clip here shortly. And part of I'll play that clip now. I'm going to go back to the year 2001. That issue was still a major issue then. There was a gentleman by the name of Lloyd Noel. He was a Grenadian attorney at the time. And his theory of the case was that Grenadians, in fact, were the ones responsible for knowing where the whereabouts of Maurice Bishop's body and his comrades and his colleagues were, owing to the fact that there was a curfew in the state of Grenada that lasted for almost a week before the U.S. invasion of the island. And this is what Mr. Lloyd Noel had to say of blessed memory. I'll pull it up now and play the clip. We'll both listen to it now.
Some way. They were burnt and they were buried in a common grave.
Just let me just...
Shooting on the fort. Soldiers took the...
I know that.
We've had ample evidence that after the shooting on the fort, soldiers took the bodies down to Calivine some way. They were burnt and they were buried in a common grave. We know that. If anybody say otherwise now, then we have to accept that what was said before was a lie. And I don't think that's valid because that came out in the case. It's properly documented. The story was that after the Americans came, after the 25th of October, they got certain remains down in Calivine. You know, the readers know, the public knows that those remains have been tested. They were brought back to Washington. We had endless reports. 2 years ago, we had the college boys doing some sort of a research, and they said they found bones in the cemetery. Oh, come on. All sorts of scientists, forensic and otherwise, have had to deal with it. What truth that could tell us now any particular bone belonged to Maurice Bishop or Norris Bain or Jacqueline Cliff? We are not making sense.
So, Martine, that was an interview. I actually conducted that interview. I'm aging myself now, but I was maybe 19 or 20 years old there. Wow. But Mr. Lloyd Noel is making the point, and there are many of his ilk who are saying, in the context of Grenadians, that there are still Grenadians around who are being very tight-lipped on this issue. Was that a theme that emerged in some of your reporting?
I mean, I don't know if I could actually say that that's true. I mean, there were some people that we tried to interview who, for example, members of the Grenada 17 and individuals who did not want to be interviewed because, this is a really difficult set of memories for them. And obviously this is a very polarizing issue in Grenada when you bring up kind of the different sides at the end of the Maurice Bishop government. But we talked firsthand to several people who saw bodies loaded on a truck, taken to Calivine, people who were there when the bodies were taken off the truck in Calivine, when they were put in this pit, when they were set on fire, people who saw the bodies there after that happened. So to me, I have seen no account that questions whether the bodies of the people who were executed on the fort ended up at Calivine in a pit where they were burned. And the U.S. government acknowledges in this report, as Lloyd Newell points out, this has been documented in the past too, that the U.S. government, U.S. Army shows up to Calaveras. They've been asking around, where are Maurice Bishop's remains? People say, you should go to Calaveras, you should check there. They go there, they see bodies that have been burned in a pit. So to me, like, that chain of custody doesn't have a lot to challenge it. And this question of what happened after is the real question. Did the U.S. government get there, say, look, these bodies are so deteriorated, we can try to identify them, and they try that, but they can't do it. And then they say, we don't know what we had, and we'll just give it over to the funeral home. Or, again, there's the Earl Brown account, the Jamaican military officer who says, no, like, the bodies were identifiable. But to me, like, that's where the path starts to fork. I understand that there's still so much tension and pain around different individuals who were involved in October 19th and the sense of, people wanting to hear more and understand more. But again, like, I just have not heard a credible account that challenges anything other than the idea of, or like puts forward anything other than the idea that these bodies were taken by members of the Grenadian military to Calaveras, where they were then put in a pit and set on fire.
We have some other viewer questions. Of course, this issue is still still remains a very unresolved and sore point, and as your part, and very painful. Intergenerational trauma is real. That type of trauma is extremely very raw in the psyche of many Grenadians. But the entire trauma of that period. But there was some viewer is asking, and I'm gonna pull that up here. Let's see. I think I probably lost that question, but I think that the viewer was asking, what motivated you to get involved in this project? But as I would tell the viewer now, perhaps you should listen to the podcast, The Empty Grave of Maurice Bishop, because Martine articulately explains how she got involved in this project. But Martine, is there anything else in this conversation that you wish to add that we did not speak about, that you wanted to tackle?
No, well, I mean, I'm happy to talk about, for folks who didn't hear the podcast, I am Caribbean American by background. My mom's family is from Trinidad, and then my folks recently retired to Grenada, or not so recently now. I think it was 8 years ago. And so I'd always kind of grown up hearing about the history of Urgent Fury, about Maurice Bishop, and then it was in the last maybe 6 or so years that I started to get more kind of aggressively interested in reading books and talking to my parents' friends about where were you in 1983, hearing their memories, and just thinking that it's a really fascinating, really important history. And so I think working at a place like the Washington Post, a big part of what we do is trying to understand what the U.S. government is doing, how the U.S. government interacts with the rest of the world, and also holding the U.S. government accountable in situations in which that is warranted. And so, to me, I felt like this was something that, it probably won't surprise you, not that many American journalists are paying attention to, but to me, it felt like it remains a really important story, has real stakes for the lives of Grenadians and people, as you said, who carry that trauma with them. And I just am really grateful to people who I interviewed for the podcast who were willing to speak with us, willing to share their memories, and for people who have listened to the podcast. Like, I have an immense amount of gratitude too, because I know that this is a history that is extremely personal for the folks who lived it or for whom their family members lived it. And it's really it's really an honor to be able to tell this story and to be able to keep digging on it.
Yeah. When you won the Peabody Award for this work, or when you were nominated, how did you know, first and foremost, that the Empty Grave of Comrade Bishop came up for a Peabody nomination?
Oh, we got an email. It was a really nice email. We knew that we were a finalist first, they told us, and then we were so excited just with that. And then we found out a little while later that we had won, which was so incredible and a real honor. And what was really exciting is that, so we went to Los Angeles. They have a big award ceremony where like celebrities come, and it feels kind of like the Oscars. And I don't know if folks are familiar with Amanda Seales. She's an actress here in the States who
Grenadian. She has Grenadian background.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. She was an Insecure, and I knew that she was Grenadian. And so they basically had actors, famous people introducing each winner of each project that had won a Peabody Award. And so I remember going backstage and seeing her, and my eyes lit up, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Amanda Seales who's going to announce this. Like it makes sense because she's Grenadian, and she was so lovely. And that was a really special memory, but mostly just being able to be on stage and share with more people our project and also this history.
Yes. And of course, I believe the corporal also was there from Jamaica.
Yes. Yeah. He came. He lives in Los Angeles now, and so we had invited him to be our guest of honor because his account was so pivotal in our podcast.
I know that Maurice Bishop's daughter lives in California. I'm not sure if she knew about it or if you guys have been in touch with her. Did she offer to be interviewed at all?
We had reached out to her, and I had communicated with her a few times, and she decided that she didn't want to be interviewed, which I completely respect. And my sense is that this is something that she's spoken about a few times over the years, and feels like she doesn't, need to continue to speak out on it. But I know that she's very invested in this as well, and she'd actually communicated in the past with the U.S. government looking for answers.
Yes, and I know that she brought down a team of forensic experts in Grenada as well to do that work too. So that's so much mental work, physical work, intellectual, emotional work that has gone into that. Martine, any final comments from you as we go to the next segment?
I just encourage people who are interested in this, please listen to the podcast, and I'd love to hear from you too. My email is martine.powers@washpost.com, or you can also email emptygrave@washpost.com. As I said, we're continuing to report on this, and every kind of firsthand account, every piece of feedback from listeners or people who have some thoughts on this is incredibly valuable to us. So we'd love to hear from folks, and I'll try to go on today and on the Facebook page as well, and add all the information about where people can listen to this and where people can engage more and where they can read the report. They could download it themselves and take a look and see what they think. And I think people would find it really fascinating.
Yeah, the report is written in such government speak. Yeah, it's very interesting.
I wanted a really exciting takeaway, and this was not in this report.
Yeah, no, it was not. It was not because I jumped at it when you reached out. But certainly, Martine, we are in the Washington, D.C. area. Perhaps we can grab a coffee or brunch.
I would love that. Let's absolutely make that happen.
Yes. Whenever I make it into downtown, absolutely. Martine Powers, thank you for appearing on the Bub Report this week.
Thank you for having me. It's a real honor.
Yes, absolutely. Viewers and listeners, we just concluded our conversation with Martine Powers. Of course, Martine Powers is one of the lead producers on the podcast series, The Empty Grave of Comrade Bishop. If you have not had the opportunity to listen to that podcast, I suggest you do. It makes for blockbuster listening. It really, really, really does. And of course, we are going to publish links on our page in respect of where you can actually find the podcast. So what we will do now, folks, is we will take a quick break and come back with the second segment of the Bub Report. Of course, if you're just joining us, please remember to like and share this week's live stream. Please stand by.
We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style. And so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response.
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
This is a very interesting question.
The Bub Reports with Dr. Kellon Bub. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's episode of the Bub Report. If you're just joining us, please remember to ensure that you are sharing this week's live stream. Of course, this is a very important period in Grenadian history, irrespective of where you sit ideologically. Certainly, this period means a lot to different segments of the national community. And we made the decision many, many years ago when this podcast, of course, when the Bub Report debuted, that we are going to dedicate our programming to this period. Of course, this period was also sort of whitewashed in many respects, romanticized, and one cannot speak about this period without also talking about the trauma that it inflicted on many Grenadians. Now, for Grenada's second commemoration of National Heroes Day, what they did yesterday was that they held a commemoration that paid homage to the lives lost during the tragic events of October 1983. And that event was held with great solemnity at Progress Park, where Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a friend of the Grenada Revolution, delivered a feature address. Now a public holiday and named National Heroes Day, the current administration says October 19th is intended to allow for the recognition of Grenadians who over the years significantly contributed to Grenada's legacy and history. However, a national debate rages over the idea of October 19th as the most appropriate day to observe the event. Our next guest will have a conversation on this issue while examining the powers of the Prime Minister to declare by fiat that no amplified sound should be played on October 19th. We will also examine the elements of the Noise Control Act and the National Heroes Act, respectively, to determine how both pieces of legislation fit within the rubric of the administration's definition of a National Heroes Day. And folks, let me bring in our guest for this week's edition of the program. We are joined by Mr. Dexter Mitchell. He's, of course, the founder of the Made in Grenada Festival. We're also joined by Mr. Dennis Charles, who was a political detainee during the period of 1979 during the Grenada Revolution. I'm not sure of the years, but of course he'll correct me. Of course, we're also joined by Dr. Terence Marishaw, returning guest to the program. And joining him as well is Mr. Anselm Clouden. Mr. Anselm Clouden, of course, who is an attorney. Gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report.
Thank you. And thank you for the kind invitation.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Marishaw, initially, we honestly were trying to get, again, sometimes we are critiqued for not having female representation of the panel. We did reach out to Sister Peggy Nesfield to appear on the program today, but unfortunately, she declined, citing the sensitive nature of this period for her. And of course, we respect that decision. But I do want to begin this conversation with Dr. Marichaux and Mr. Charles. Now, Dr. Marichaux and Mr. Charles, both of you are, shall we say, ideologically on different sides of the political spectrum in many respects. But it does appear as if you have come to an agreement that on the question of October 19th as National Heroes Day and what it should be designed as a national holiday. Of course, Dr. Marichaux, you articulated before that this should be National Martyrs Day and not National Heroes Day. I want to begin with your theory of the case here, sir.
Yes, Canon. This topic has been raging, particularly over the last year since the government decided to name it as National Heroes Day. You remember last year, on October the 19th, or prior to October the 19th, when they declared that it was going to be National Heroes Day, they also sought to launch the
independence
celebrations on that particular day. Now, for many of us, that was unacceptable because it is very, very difficult to celebrate national heroes in what would be a celebratory kind of activity on the same day that you are going to celebrate, or not celebrate in this case, although you can celebrate the lives of people, but commemorate October the 19th, which is a profoundly solemn occasion. Now, we have fought for almost 40 years for that day to be declared a national holiday. It's certainly not a day for festivities and dancing and making a lot of noise, with DJs and all of that. But a day of solemn recognition, a day of solemn reflection because of the importance of the day, because of its transcendental impact in Grenadian history. And so for 40 years, we have fought for that. And finally, last year, for the first time, the government of the day decided that they were going to make October the 19th a national holiday. And we are very happy with that decision. But last year, were it not for our timely intervention again, when they tried to conflate the two activities, it would have gone ahead. And again, it would not have sit well with the families of the victims of October the 19th. And so, because we intervened and we had frank discussions with the Independence Committee headed by Dr. Crawford, we came to the decision, the conclusion that the launching of the independence should not be on the same day as October the 19th. And we finally came to a consensus and it was moved, appropriately so. This year, we have a problem again. And there should not be any problem. I mean, if you're going to commemorate the lives or memorialize the people who died on October the 19th, you have to do it properly. It is our equivalent of 9/11. 9/11 in the United States is always celebrated at Ground Zero in New York. It's never moved to any other place or any other location. The thinking of the government this year is that this activity is too St. George's centric, that many people are complaining that too many activities are being held in St. George's and they want to see something different. But I don't know if it is restricted to this particular event. I mean, yes, that may be so. But there are some events that you cannot move around. This is a memorial activity. This is an activity where you have to celebrate it in the place or close to where it occurred. Last year, we could understand moving it to the stadium because it was the inauguration of the National Heroes Day, but also the fort was under active construction. So it was a difficult place to have it at that time. Although last year, following the activity in the stadium, we still went and were able to lay wreaths on the wall where these people, Maurice Bishop and his colleagues were massacred, were able to do that. This year again, they have decided, without any consultation with the families of the victims, to move this activity to Progress Park in St. Andrew, and in subsequent years to have another parish host it. Well, as far as we are concerned, and the families, we felt very disappointed with that decision. And we again had discussions with the lady who heads, Mr. Alexis, the National Celebrations Committee, and told her that in no uncertain manner that the families do not support that move. Well, it seemed that that decision was already cast in stone, because without consulting us first, they still went ahead and made that decision. And so we also informed them, and we put out a statement saying that by unanimous agreement, the families would not attend that activity, because moving it to St. Andrew actually dilutes and in a sense desecrates what we have been fighting for and what we have done traditionally for the last 40 years. And so they still decided to go ahead. And we also, as the Maurice Bishop and October 19 Martyrs Foundation, we got permission and we held the activity that we would normally hold at the fort, which was a very beautiful activity for all those who attended, including some foreign journalists. And it is a solemn activity, we're not fighting. Let people just complicate life sometimes. It's just a simple thing. If there's a tradition of holding it for all these years, for 40 years, why change it? Why move it to somewhere else without even consulting anybody on this? And only rationale that you give is the fact that everything is too St. George's centric and but
the administration's counter argument might be that what occurred on October 19th and the commemoration of October 19th would be sort of the catch-all rubric for a National Heroes Day, so that it should not only encompass what occurred there, but it's a catch-all event.
You see, I think they have some problems with that. I think it's a conundrum that they have not been able to solve even for themselves. 1 year later, you have not named any national heroes.
Yes.
And it is difficult to celebrate heroes, not necessarily people who have died, because one of the people that we consider as a hero, for example, is Kirani James. And you have to understand that, one, if you celebrate the national heroes, yes, you could have the jump and wave and all of the music and so on. It's a celebratory period. It's a period when you can celebrate your heroes and the rich contributions that have been made by people over the years to Grenada to bring us where we are today as a people. But it is difficult in the same breath to celebrate National Heroes Day with people who have been martyred, people who have died and who that we memorialize in a very solemn and respectful way, in a way that you cannot do it on a National Heroes Day. So those two things need to be separated. October the 19th needs to be a standalone activity where, if you want to call it Martyrs Day or National Martyrs Day, if you're going to have a national holiday and you're going to be memorializing people who died on October the 19th, then so be it. Do it that way. There are many other days you can name as Heroes Day when, yes, you can have a real celebration and you won't have restrictions with music or anything like that. It will be a day to really, really celebrate, but you can't conflate a solemn activity as October the 19th with National Heroes Day, which is a more celebratory kind of thing.
Yeah. Dr. Marshall, stick up in there, and I see some ad hominem comments in the comment section, and I'm ready today to deal with some of those. Dr. Marshall is not a Johnny-come-lately. He has been honoring the memory of his deceased colleagues and comrades since he returned to Grenada from studying in Cuba. He has been the political leader of the now defunct Maurice Bishop Patriotic Movement. So he's not someone that is coming and trying to attack the government on this, as I'm seeing in the way he come out. I am ready for this today because I will be engaging in blocking.
Go
ahead, Dr. Marshall.
We never really wanted this to be a political event and to be
And it
treated
should not be. It should not be at
as a
all.
political football. But if you
Yes.
gather the sentiments of people all around, you'll find that, you know, there needs to be debate. There's no question about that. There needs to be some kind of consultation with people, and then you can come up with a clear idea in terms of how you're going to celebrate Heroes Day and a clear idea as how you're going to celebrate October the 19th. I don't think there is any need to go any further or make it any different to what has been done for 40 years. Just continue the tradition that has been set for 40 years and just leave it like that. Then you have the activity at the fort and that's it. If you want also as a compromise to have an activity on the fort with, you know, the officials and everything, the Prime Minister and all of these different people on the fort on October the 19th, you can have that. And also if you want after that to have another activity that celebrates heroes, but that activity itself has to be maintained in the tradition that it has been done over the last 40 years. And again, as I said, I don't want it to look as if there's a contention here between the foundation and the government politically. There's no, we don't want it to be a political fight or anything like that. We're clear about that. But at the same time, we will continue to struggle so that the day is properly observed. That's all it is, just properly observed.
Absolutely. Let me bring in Mr. Charles, and the way that I set up this conversation, and I'll get to Council Clouden shortly. Mr. Charles, I suspect that you and Dr. Maricho, as I said before, you are not in agreement on the legacies of the revolution. You come from a different side of, shall we say, the historic and political spectrum, as do Dr. Maricho, but you came together on this issue. So let us talk about your perspective. How similar is it? First and foremost, do you agree with October 19th as being declared a public holiday?
Well, yes. Good morning to you, Dr. Bob, and everyone on the panel. It's a pleasure to be here again. I had met Dr. Maricho before, I think on your program, and we have a lot of commonality. We have differences, of course, empirical evidence. I mean, what I've been through, things that I've seen with my eye. I don't think anyone on this panel has my kind of experience, none. And having said so, it amazes me that to this day, no one is interested in really going out and find what really went on for 4.5 years on the other side of the spectrum. They are not interested. I thought when we left the meeting with you, maybe last year, I think.
On last year's program, yes.
Yeah, we had an agreement. I think it was put forward by Dr. Gus John, I think.
Yes, in England.
That we will work on a truth and reconciliation forum so that we can start the healing process, right? We need to get documentation of our history, accurate and objective. Take out the fluff, take out the propaganda, take out all that revolution stuff. You know, if you support this or you like Code or you like Bishop and whatever the case might be, and let us come to the truth, because there is only one truth. And I have left messages, not a phone call, not a return, no nothing, no answer, no nothing. Fell on deaf ears, nobody interested. And I asked myself, why? No one is interested in unearthing what went on during the revolution, but we should glorify this and glorify that and heroes this and heroes that. Who are the heroes? Who say so? Right? You don't read a book by the cover. You judge a man not by his skin color, but by the content of his character. And I believe in Dr. Martin Luther King. Show me your deeds. By your deeds you shall know them. A lot of what went on during the revolution, particularly by Maurice Bishop, is heinous. And he himself had his hand in torture, stuffing up a lighted cigar he had, smoking in a detainee nose hole. and I take my 2 eyes and see this man up in Richmond Hill Prison, where he used to come and laugh. He used to be on the fort too.
Yes, yes, Mr. Charles, we will speak to this
let me
issue.
go from
But
that.
yes, get back. Yes, please.
Yeah, let me get back. So I just want he park his seat to end. And let us be objective and truthful for once. Okay?
So, yes, go ahead. Make your final point and then I'll interject.
I agree that, in my view, some of what Dr. Maurice said, I agree. If we want to have what is called a Heroes Day, it should not be tainted or tangled up with October 19th. October 19th should be a day of mourning. We should be in the church asking the Lord for forgiveness for what we did, Grenadians to Grenadians, to one another. You should not be jumping up, playing music, playing jab, if you will, and whining and doing all them kind of stuff what Grenadians do. I mean, you're Grenadian too, just like myself, so we know what's gonna happen, right? Supposedly a motorcade going around the country ending up in Progress Park, Heroes Day, right? Well, that Progress Park was built by who? By Gary. I don't understand the whole thing. I prefer, if they're gonna have it in St. George, as he said. But the whole question is, are our heroes only rebel supporters? I mean, how come we make that decision that the only heroes we have in Grenada are people who died on October 19th? This is crazy, and I can't believe it. In this day and age, we have to be more civilized than that. Yeah. On March 13th, 1951, thereabout, we had 3 heroes, if you know your history, who were murdered in Latant.
That history I know.
Well, right. So are they heroes too? Right. Are they not heroes? Only rebel people are hero? And if you're not for the rebel, you're not a hero?
Well, so again, yes, but that is conjecture because the administration did not make any indication that they have announced any national heroes yet. But I can understand how commemorating National Heroes Day on October 19th can give the perspective of it being skewed towards one side or the other. Yeah. Now, I should also note that the government did set the tone in respect of how yesterday ought to have been commemorated with the banning of amplified music. So I'm sure that that was going to be enforced, and that's going to bring us to the next element of this conversation, where I'm going to bring in Mr. Cloud, but I'll get back to you then, Mr. Charles. So the point I'm making is I don't think there would be any noise or jab on a day like October 19th moving forward, according to the ordinances that the government plans to bring before Parliament as law. But Mr. Clouden, let me bring you in here. Mr. Clouden, welcome to the Bub Report, sir. And it's good to have you again. I like your Hawaii shirt. Maybe you should leave that in the will for me, sir. It's good to see you, Mr. Clouden.
Thank you, Dr. Bob, and it's always a distinct pleasure to be on your show.
Sir. Yes, sir.
I wish to extend my greetings to fellow members of the panel, especially my good friend and former classmate, Dr. Terry Marichaud. At this juncture, before I delve into the restrictions permitted by the Noise Control Act,
yes,
Act 7 of 2006, let me state explicitly that I do agree with Dr. Marichaud in the context that this occasion, Heroes Day, it's an auspicious occasion. But it ought not to be restricted necessarily only to those who have passed on. It would also be applicable and relevant to some of our living heroes. So that there's a level of sobriety and that ought to be observed. And therefore, I think some arrangements could be made. Dr. Marichaud is right, and we can learn from the experiences of others around us. That fatal incident at 9/11 in New York, from time to time, folks return to the site and they pay homage to those that have fallen. Similarly, I think it's appropriate that we hallow the site in future undertakings, but It doesn't necessarily have to be celebratory at that site. It could be solemn, as it ought to be, in remembrance. And then, because you would have living heroes too, we may choose to celebrate their lives while alive, and you can have a function where the music need not be restricted in that context, so that you have one solemn, hallowed, and do reverence to the site where this dastardly act took place, and we all feel a sense of regret and sorrow, because the late Bishop and his Maurice Bishop and others whom we memorialize were very, very astute and gave Grenada a legacy that would continue for generations to come. Now, let me move on to the act itself.
Yes, but before you do, Mr. Clouden, what I hear you saying here is that you agree with Dr. Marichaud in respect of not having Heroes Day on the 19th, or that perhaps the day should not be framed as a National Heroes Day, that perhaps we can find another day that would commemorate all national heroes that does not have the same weight as an October 19th?
Yeah. Well, you see, there's nothing wrong with the date necessarily, because the design, and as I've always said, we have a very caring and visionary Prime Minister in this dispensation, and we must be thankful to the Lord for this. And he, no doubt, after 40 years of no mention of the 19th, he suddenly envisaged that justice would properly be done if the 19 and the events of the 19 are commemorated in some fashion. Now, Dr. Bob, I agree with Dr. Marichaud that the appropriate site for such commemoration of those heroes ought to be the fort. But unfortunately, on this occasion, I know there have been massive renovations undertaken on the fort, and it certainly would be inappropriate at this juncture to have such an activity on the fort at this particular point in time. But it is in that context I support his contention that at least there must be some reverence, some congregation of those commemorating the event at the site of the event. That's where I agree with him, not necessarily with respect to the date.
Okay, very well.
The date is appropriate.
Very well. Okay, so thanks for that nuance there. Nuance is important. Now, Mr. Clouden, of course, when we reached out to you, the context was the other tea leaf here in respect of October 19th was the decision by the Prime Minister to declare that no amplified sound should be played on that day. So what I brought you here, sir, to talk about is the Noise Control Act, which I suspect would govern the powers of the minister to make those calls?
That is correct, but it's not the Prime Minister. It's the Minister of Health.
It's the Minister of Health, but it was not gazetted by the Minister of Health.
Well, if it was gazetted by the Prime Minister, he must have done so by designation, because the Act itself, Act 7 of 2006, prescribed.
And which section are we looking at under the Act? Because I want to share that.
I'm looking at Section 2, interpretation.
Section 2, interpretation. Thank you.
You see, minister means minister responsible for health and the environment. So any regulations promulgated under the Act must be done by the Minister of Health, unless the minister designates that responsibility to the Prime Minister for gazetting purposes.
Okay.
And it goes on. The minister may make at regulations 30 of the Act. It says the minister, meaning the Minister of Health and the Environment, may make regulations generally for carrying out the purposes of this Act, for providing for such matters as are contemplated by or necessary for the given full effect to this Act and for its due administration. Now, the Act is very, very comprehensive. It deals with a number of sections, but for example, the minister can designate certain areas for noise abatement and call it noise abatement zone. Of course, it goes without saying that whenever proceedings are to be taken by the minister, either by designation or otherwise, that ought to be gazetted. And therefore, the Prime Minister has authority once the minister designates that authority to him under the Act.
By the Minister of Health. I always, you know, I'm glad that you said that, because I was always under the impression that that ought to be a designation of the Minister of National Security. And that's why education is important.
Now, I take you to Section 11.
Yes, let's go to Section 11.
Yes. Designation of noise abatement zone. As I have indicated, the minister can designate certain areas where non-amplified music ought not to be played. It says, so the minister may, by order in the Gazette, designate any area in the state of Grenada a noise abatement zone. Now, if he can designate any area in the state of Grenada, he can designate the entire country as a noise abatement zone temporarily, of course. This is what gives him the power to enforce it, the police the power to enforce it once it is so designated. Subsection 2, an order under this section shall specify the area or classes of premises to which it applies, the reason for the order and the conditions that apply. So that the minister is within his authority, full force, designated to him by the Act itself, to declare the entire country for limited purposes, as was specified, as a zone, a noise abatement zone.
Right. And Mr. Clouden, as a follow-up to that, there would therefore not be a need within the context of making a decision around National Heroes Day as a national holiday to include this a noise amendment to any, well, first of all, you know, in respect of that particular bank holiday, because I do believe there is a Bank Holidays Act as well, because the legislation already exists.
Well, not as clear as one would have appreciated. And this is why the Prime Minister himself at the celebration indicated that there's going to be amendment to the Act. Very soon there would be an amendment submitted to Parliament. So that it is in that Act really certain aspects of the National Heroes Day would be clearly defined and spelled out as to the manner of celebration and the like. The selection of heroes, there must be a committee set up and you know, a certain procedure which is not now in existence. I feel
when you say it's not now in existence, Mr. Clouden, we do have a National Heroes legislation in place, and I can pull that up now.
No, I'm not disputing that, but what I'm saying is the abundance of clarity that is needed. Okay, it's not yet been statutorized.
Okay, right. So of course, and then with legislation are living things, as you know. They can always be amended.
That is correct, Dr. Bob.
But Mr. Clouden, there is another element of this conversation, and I want to bring in Mr. Dexter Mitchell here. Mr. Mitchell, as a promoter who, of course, you know, operates within that circle. And the reason I brought Mr. Mitchell here on the program, I don't think there is any relationship between you, Mr. Mitchell, and the Mitchells, or that one Mitchell that we're speaking about, sir. I don't know, maybe there is, I don't know. It's all in jest. Okay, it's all in jest. But there was a particular promoter, and we attempted to reach out to the promoter, and many promoters, obviously, they did not want to speak to this issue. But I'll raise this with you as well, Mr. Clouden. But Waggy, one of the promoters in Grenada, he actually had a pre-scheduled event for October 19th that he has had to cancel as a result of that change, this particular ordinance being enforced here. Mr. Mitchell, can you talk about how folks within that promotion community responded to that decision? And let's get your overall thoughts, because I'm sure you as well, you're probably in two minds on this as well.
Well, thank you very much for having me on this morning, Dr. Bob, and good morning to your esteemed fellow guest. Let me start off by saying that as business people, I think no one wants to circumvent the laws or the intent of the laws of Grenada. I think what has been, and it was not just Wagati, there were, to my knowledge, in excess of 15 events that were scheduled over the weekend that were canceled or postponed because of the declaration by the Prime Minister. The challenge is that events, you do not just put on events. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of preparation and planning that has to go into an event. So to have an event canceled on Wednesday, an event that is scheduled for Friday night or Saturday or Sunday to be canceled on Wednesday, obviously the persons who made the investments are going to lose monies. Even if you reschedule, I think Wagati has rescheduled to next weekend, there is still some costs that are going to be involved in that rescheduling. The challenge for the industry, and in speaking to other people in the industry, is that we feel, notwithstanding everything that has been said, and I agree with most of what has been said, Dr. Maurice, what the significance of October 19th, and obviously this is much bigger than trying to put on an event. But we in the industry feel that the industry is under attack. This is the third declaration in 2024 without much consultation that has forced promoters to have to cancel events. It happened before independence. If you remember, just before independence, the police put out a release saying that all permissions that were granted were reneged. Happened again Carnival Saturday night, where there was a limit on the amount of foreign artists who could come into Grenada on Carnival weekend, and it affected one major event. Now here we have it happening again for October 19th. So I think that the challenge for us is an understanding of the environment in which we operate. Who is in charge, who has the final say, and as Mr. Clouden pointed out now, obviously the minister does. But when you go through all the right channels, starting with if you have to bring in somebody from outside of the OECS, you have to get work permits. So those are granted by the Ministry of Labor. You get your requisite permissions from the Internal Revenue Department, and ultimately you get permission from the RGPF. Then to have 2 or 3 days before the event to have it completely cancelled, I think that is a challenge. And moving forward, I think we would like some clear indications as to what kind of atmosphere are we operating in. So when are the periods? Is there a moratorium on events for independence, for Carnival, or a certain part of Carnival, for Christmas, for October 19th, October 25th, Easter weekend, so that we can function within that? As it stands right now, business people within the industry are scared to make business decisions moving forward, because you can go ahead and make all the investment, which includes booking artists, making down payments, promoting your event, just to have it cancelled by a declaration by the Minister of Health, as we found out now, or the Prime Minister 2 or 3 days before your event. So I think that is where we are right now. It is costing. Whenever you have to put an event off, there is a cost to it. And obviously for the bigger events, Wagati's event, there's another event that involves some foreign artists. There are significant costs. So I think the request from the industry is more engagement and clarity on where, when, and where are the moratoriums. Can we know specifically that these things are not supposed to happen
in advance of those activities? Yes,
it's happening, and I think there could have been there were opportunities for engagement, because I think in Wagati's case, he actually had a press launch of his event. There have been ads for his event and other events running for weeks. So there could have been some engagement to say, this is the intent, this is what we are trying to do. And obviously, as citizens of Grenada, we are going to back down and say, okay, fine, but to have the last minute cancellations by a decree or declaration, I think it is hurting the industry right now, and it's not just the people who are involved, not the people putting on the events, but the spill-off effects, the vendors, the taxi drivers, the bus drivers, the saloons, and so on, who gear up, who might have made investment in anticipation of a windfall, who have been affected by those cancellations also.
Now, the administration would say, Dexter, that promoters and those involved knew about this since last year. However, one would say, and of course, the promoters did not get the permission by themselves. So if the promoters should know about it, so too should the permission granting authority.
Well, of course, we are not operating in a vacuum. Like I said, there are several layers to hosting a major event. Beginning with the Ministry of Labor, you have to secure work permits. You have to be tax compliant, so you have to go through the IRD, and of course, you have to get the permission from the Royal Grenada Police Force. So I'm a little taken aback by the thought that we knew since last year. I don't think it was very clear what the intent was, what was going to happen on October 19th in 2024. I mean, you had people outside of, I'm speaking now outside of the entertainment industry, you had people asking, leading up to October 19th, whether it was still a holiday. I don't think it was very clear that October 19th, 2024 was going to be a holiday. And even so, even if that was the case, there was an opportunity for engagement that people could have been contacted, that the Prime Minister, as the Minister of National Security, could have said to his police department, I noticed events have been advertised, it has been brought to my attention. Can you deal with that for me, please? So instead of him having to make a declaration last Wednesday, people could have been called privately and said, based on the intent of the Prime Minister, the intent of the government coming off of last year, we would advise that you not do this event, put it off to another date. But so it kind of speaks to a divide between the intent of the government and the role and the responsibility of the Royal Grenada Police Force. It is unfortunate because, like I said, it is our intent to adhere, and we've always adhered to all the rules of the state, but it is disheartening, and it is not good for business when you have cancellations, and the cancellations are so last minute. And like I said, it is a bit of a worrying trend because this is the third time in 2024 it has happened when monies have been invested, plans have been made, permission granted by state authorities, and then
venues booked and all of that. But Mr. Clouden, I want to bring you in here. Dr. Marisha, I promise we'll be getting back to you shortly around this whole National Heroes issue, but that's one of the issues that's one of the tea leaves that has animated this conversation. Council Clouden, I want to bring you in here on two issues. One, if a citizen finds that he has been aggrieved in this situation, meaning that they got all of the necessary permission, right, from the state to hold an event, only for the state to say a couple days before the holding of that said event that you can no longer have that event. Is there anything in law that can be a legal recourse to that aggrieved party here? In this case, it would be the promoters.
Yes, you can make an appeal. You can appeal to a judge in chambers. Let me take you to 14, section 14.
And that's also in the Noise Control Act.
That is precisely in the Noise Control Act. I may take you there circumspectly to appeal to a judge in chambers. Yes, appeal to a judge in chambers. Where any provisions of this act provides for an appeal to a judge in chambers, the procedure shall be by way of an application for an order, and the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court civil procedure rules shall apply to these proceedings. The judge may at any stage of the proceedings, either on his or her own motion, that's sua sponte, we say, or an application by any party to an appeal, adjourn the hearing of the appeal or any part thereof into open court as he or she thinks fit. No appeal shall lie from the exercise of the judge's discretion to adjourn or not to adjourn the proceedings in the open court. Now the whole thrust, you see, of the section of the act is to abate unnecessary noise that creates a nuisance, because a nuisance is an actionable tort at common law. So that the thrust of the act is to abate a nuisance. But if for whatever reason there's some miscarriage, then there are summary proceedings that can take place before the magistrate. Let me take you circumspectly to sections 8 of the act itself. Sections 8. A magistrate may act under this section on a complaint by any person on the grounds that that person is aggrieved by noise amounting to a nuisance. If the magistrate is satisfied that the alleged nuisance exists, or that although abated, it is likely to recur, the magistrate may make an order for either or both of the following purposes: requiring the defendant to abate and or cease the nuisance within a time specified in the order, and to execute any works necessary for that purpose; prohibiting a reoccurrence of the nuisance, and requiring the defendant within a time specified in the order to execute any works necessary to prevent the reoccurrence. And it goes on and on. Any person who, without reasonable excuse, contravenes any requirement of an order under subsection 2 is guilty of an offense. So the thrust of the Act, too, is not to be necessarily punitive, but to take the necessary legal steps at the magisterial or first instance level to abate the nuisance. Now, the exemptions, for example, carnival, the Act exempts noise abatement at carnival time, but it says it gives certain prescribed times from 12 midnight and the like, from 6 to 12 as the case may be.
Yes.
But, you know, so that the exceptions to the general rule.
Now, and the other issue here, Mr. Clouden, and of course, one viewer sort of reminded me that I was being misleading. I misspoke by saying that it was a couple hours, and I corrected myself instantly to say that it was a couple days. So thank you for that correction. Yes, Mr. Clouden. So let us talk about the other issue here, and that has to do with the powers of the Prime Minister, the powers of the state to dictate how someone should observe a particular holiday. Is there anything in law that speaks to how someone can dictate to someone how they celebrate a particular holiday, whether it's a high holy day or a high solemn day, as we've seen in the case of the debates around October 19th? There is another competing school of thought here that as a private citizen, you can't tell me how to, observe a day. If I don't want to observe a day, then what's in it for you?
Well, that is so. But let me take it to section 4, the test of reasonableness. But let me say this: the Constitution of Grenada specifically outlines, gives one the right of privacy, and in this act they have incorporated that constitutional provision, and this is what the constitutional provision says: the rights of privacy of family life, and the right of every individual to peaceful enjoyment of his or her home and immediate surroundings. So that, in fact, an order made that abrogates or infringes the constitutionally protected right to privacy of family life and the right of every individual to the peaceful enjoyment of his or her home and immediate surroundings, if that right is unreasonably infringed or abrogated, of course, the government could be taken to task and declare such an order made because of its constitutional infringement as ultra varies the Constitution and therefore must be struck down. Or if it is an existing law, but this isn't an existing law. This act came into force in 2006. Existing law means laws that were passed prior to 1974. And there's a savings provision and a savings clause And if it's inconsistent with the Constitution, it must then be modified to brought into conformity with the Constitution as now handed down. Let me say this here and now, Dr. Bob.
Yes, sir.
I suspect in the second term of this NDC government, they're going to bring about constitutional changes. And that in itself would be an historic event, because this Constitution we have, it fetters or as it were, abrogates our sovereign rights. For example, we can't even go to CCJ because somebody sits in England and says that you must have a referendum. To us and to others, you can go. So that there's such inconsistency. And if we intend to move as a region, or a sub-region, the OECS, I think that we need constitutional reform as a matter of urgency. But I suspect this government and this prime minister is settling down and setting the stage in the second term for such constitutional, bringing into Grenada a new constitution that is in keeping with the expectations of the people. And we need it urgently.
Well, except, Mr. Clouden, the counter argument might be, well, there were other opportunities for referenda in the past, and we know if past is prologue, Grenada continues to be a very divided and polarized society. And whichever party brings it, and we saw what happened with the previous administration, and that may be prologue.
But you see, that is the point, yes. Dr. Bob. There should be no need for a referendum.
Right.
A state is sovereign.
But the question is, how do you bypass that constitutional requirement for referendum?
Well,
would it need a 2/3 majority in parliament to do that?
Well, I would suspect, if you're sovereign, you need a 2/3 majority in parliament to bind you to a treaty, international and otherwise. And you can do that because you're a sovereign state.
Yes.
Well, why are you a sovereign state and you can't go to the CCJ and make it your court of final appeal? You must go to a referendum for that after you have a duly elected government that can take sovereign acts on behalf of the state. The point I'm making is that constitution needs to be revoked, revamped, and the people be put in a position where a constitution can emerge that is in keeping with the legitimate expectations of governance. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. And Mr. Clouden, thank you so much. It's always refreshing to hear you speak on these matters and bring legal clarity, because sometimes when we have these conversations, it's never grounded in what the law is, right? So it's very important. But let me bring back Dr. Marichal and Mr. Charles here. Now, Mr. Charles, I want to kick this off with you, sir, because in a Facebook, I believe it was in a Facebook Live segment you did, sir, you indicated then that you had issues with how perhaps the administration would be proceeding with the idea of determining who a national hero should be and what a national hero should look like. Can you talk about your vision of what you believe a Grenadian national hero should look like?
Yes, Dr. Bob, thank you again for the opportunity to be explicit in what I think constitutes a national hero. Now, a national hero, in my view, should be somebody apolitical. Each government that comes into power should not pick up their diehard supporters, enthusiasts, people that really fight the good fight for them, and because of political connections, reward them with some sort of heroism or whatever name you want to call it. Because what would happen if they were to lose the election next time, after 5 years, another government would come in and do the same thing too. So what is good for the goose, good for the gander? Where would we stop? Where would we draw the line? So I think there must be some sort of criteria. There must be some pros and cons. We discuss. And that person would have done so much good for the country moving it forward. For instance, Kirani James, Anderson Peters, people like that. We had a guy from, I think, Carriacou, who saved a bus that went over the carnage full of people from drowning, right? To me, in my book, this is so magnanimous, so selfless, because he could have died, right? This other one that went to build a house in Carriacou, I think to build some roof from America, New York, a carpenter, I think, and he fell off the roof and damaged his head so badly he was in Grenada. And we don't have the medical facilities and skill set to treat him. In my book, so if you only ascribe heroism when it is self-serving, I mean, this is very suspect. And they have to be a Revo supporter, or they have to die on the fort, if not no hero for you.
But Mr. Charles, the administration did not say that, and the administration has not yet announced. But the way that you're framing this is as if they're going to be doing that. We don't know that they would do that.
Well, they had plans so last year. The names came up, Jacqueline Kreff as a hero. Look, this thing started last year, and I kick against it big time. You know,
I remember that. Yes.
Well, right. So it's not something new. And I want to say that, if I may go back to Attorney Cloud, now, if you'd allow me to just pose a little question.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Right. So I just want to ask a question. Tell me, legally, what is my right, right? Or what are my rights with respect to an attempted murder on my life? We're talking about Constitution and this and that and all of that, and rights and all of that, fine. And, attempted murder, cold blood, point blank, on my life in a cell in Richmond Hill Prison during the Revolution, right? That was the first attempted murder. The second one, the bullet didn't come out. There was no more bullet in the gun. When the PRA opened and pulled the trigger on me about 5 times, nothing came out. He ran out of bullets. I ran back in my cell. I was also shot with a poison bullet, either cyanide or arsenic or whatever the name was it. My hand started to rot. You could still see the black lines, right? I don't want to get into all of that. I survived, right? 4 attempts on my life in jail for no reason. I did no wrong. And hence the reason I'm begging Dr. Maurice, and I thought he would live up to his word, right? And Dr. Gus John, they would live up to their words and they promise to have a truth forum. But apparently, I don't know if it's because of political calculations. They don't want those things to come out. They want the past to bury. If it is negative towards the PRG, keep it there, undercover. And then we glorify and long live and this and that and all. It is just hypocrisy. When would be objective and truthful and face facts? What is right under Gary is right under Bishop. What is wrong under Gary, it is wrong under Bishop. You cannot have 2 sets of rules for 2 sets of people. This is craziness.
Yes,
and I just want.
I do understand, and I still believe, Mr. Charles, that there is still a lot of healing that needs to be done in the society.
Well, we need truthfulness first.
And of course that begins with truthfulness. Yes, but let me bring in Dr. Maurice.
No, I want Mr. Clouden to answer.
Yes, Mr. Charles. We'll get to that, Mr. Clouden, later in another, when we bring up the National Heroes conversation and the constitutionality of how that should proceed. But Dr. Maurice, let us talk about the whole idea of national heroes and who should be designated as a national hero. And I'll bring Dexter in for this conversation as well, because for this independence, Mr. Mitchell, I believe, skillfully perhaps did a very good curation of Grenadian, the top 50 Grenadian artists. And maybe he can speak to his methodology, and maybe that methodology can inform how we can come up with a list of our own national heroes. But Dr. Maurice, what should a Grenadian national hero look like? Just unmute the mic, sir. Just unmute your microphone. There you go. Go ahead.
Yes. A national hero has to be someone who has made significant contributions to the growth and the development of the society. Someone who's admired and respected along the way, and who has shown throughout the trajectory of his life. Whether it could be a short life, it could be a long one.
Mm-hmm.
But that person has demonstrated through his acts the kind of life and activity that is worthy of being emulated.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that a number of people qualify for that. Now, this is something that the government has to come to grips with in terms of naming the heroes. The act is already there. There's the National Honors and Awards Act. And it even goes on to tell you about how the awarding of a hero should proceed. So everything is in law already. Although in recent conversations with a very important person, I was surprised that he didn't know that this existed, because they were saying that.
Because they were talking about doing consultations and
Exactly.
all of that. And I'm saying doing consultations, it's laid out in the act.
It's laid out in the act. It's there already. All you have to do now, the consultation should be around who are the people that we are going to designate as heroes. And again, we cannot conflate heroes with martyrs, although some martyrs can be elevated to the status of heroes.
Right.
Without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, martyrs, again, going back to this whole question of Martyrs' Day and Heroes' Day, martyrs are people who also gave their life to the cause of the country. They are martyred, they're dead. It's difficult to celebrate martyrs in the same breath as heroes. Although, as I said, let's take the example of October the 19th. Not all of the October 19th martyrs are heroes. You may want to select one or two of them out of that lot and call them heroes, but not all of them are heroes. At the same time, heroes in and of themselves are people who have really demonstrated that level of national commitment. Those kinds of people who, again, when you look at their life, you see they're patriots who love their country, who went above and beyond the call of duty to serve the country and to achieve excellence that, made the country a lot better, a lot stronger, and in many instances put Grenada on the map. Not everybody falls into that category. So that's what you have to decide, the criteria. And I think the awarding of a hero thing is in the act, and I think we need to go back to that and determine that. And just a little word to Mr. Charles. Mr. Charles, I wish I had the authority to organize a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I mean, this has already been done. I do not have that authority. I don't think, because John has the authority as well. This has to come from the authorities themselves. If they organize that, I will fully participate in something like that. And I would like to engage you, because I know what you have suffered and I empathize with you. I know what you have gone through. I know what many of the detainees have gone through. And I remember when I came back to Grenada in 1980, it was at a time when there were serious allegations of people being tortured at the prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I was appalled by that kind of thing, because I didn't believe that there was any need for that. When I left Grenada at a time when there was just joy and jubilation. There was no need for all of that. Even the little rastas that used to be in the army were persecuted. And I believe we could have had an army that had Rasta and everybody just as they came in, without imposing all of these restrictions and hardcore kind of ideology on them. So we are on the same page in many, many instances. And
that is why I thought it was important to have somebody like you join him. But let's go back to the National Heroes. And of course, that's the National Honors Act, yes? And in Part 3 of that act, it speaks to the establishment of Prestige Order of National Hero. It says a society of honor to be known as the Prestige Order of National Hero is hereby established. And talks about who constitutes the order, the Governor General, as well as persons upon whom the Prestige Order of National Hero has been confirmed, who are living. Again, on the question of living or dead here, that is something that perhaps might need to be amended, given that both national heroes, if we're going to be looking at the wider historical trajectory of Grenada, one has to consider those who are in the afterlife as well. And of course, it goes on to talk about the function of the Chancellor and a commission. It speaks of the establishment of a commission, meaning a committee that ought to be put in place. And it speaks specifically to who should be on the committee. It should comprise not more than 7 members appointed by the Governor General, who shall be 3 members nominated by the Prime Minister. 2 shall be members of the House of Representatives. The other 2 shall be a member of the Senate. No, 1 should be a member of the Senate, that is. 2 members nominated by the Leader of the Opposition. 1 who shall be a member of the House of Representatives, and the other shall be a member of the Senate. And a further 2 members appointed, 1 appointed by the Governor General after consultation with civil society, and the second member, 1 appointed by the Governor General after consultation with the religious community. So it does speak to a broad-based tripartite way of selecting that commission, and that is what I suspect that the administration might be following. But what was said in the press conference and what is here, and I'm talking about the initial press conference last year, is totally dissimilar to what is here. So I just wanted to add that and bring you in, Dexter. Let us talk about how you think we should approach who our national heroes should be and what they should look like.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bob. Very briefly, 2 things on Mr. Clouden's discourse on the Act.
Yes.
So let us be clear, the Prime Minister's announcement last Wednesday did not have anything to do with the events being a nuisance. I think he was trying to set the tone for what October 19 should be. And also the appeal that is enshrined in the Act cannot be applicable to those events. So for example, when that announcement was made on Wednesday, in the case of Wageti's event, the artist who is coming in from Jamaica has to travel on Thursday. Now, if you go into an appeal, if the code allows the appeal Thursday or Friday, how do you make the arrangements to allow the group to come in? So that becomes kind of impractical in terms of hosting events. But I digress on that. In terms of heroes, Dr. Bob, I think and as we are prone to do, we've taken up this one topic and that has become the end all. I've written extensively over the years about honoring Grenadians, and not to the extent of who has to be a hero, but who have done well, who've represented Grenada well, and who we are going to acknowledge for what they have done. So, for example, we just celebrated our 50th anniversary of independence, and there were no awards in that regard, honoring Grenadians who've done well over the last 50 years. And there have been independent celebrations in the past when no Grenadians have been so awarded. So before we get to the hero, and you so rightfully read it out, it is very clear on the composition of the commission and so on, and who should comprise that commission and what the task is. But before we get to that stage, we have to be able to, as Grenadians, not what the British gives us, who should be a member of the British Empire. And it puzzles me, what is the British Empire? We are so
don't even get me started on the whole notion of giving a black man of African descent an empire designation. No disrespect to anyone who has that designation, does not make sense to me, but go ahead.
So Jamaica has done it very well. So in Jamaica, you can get an Order of Distinction or the Order of Jamaica, which they do every year. Jamaica, as big and populated as they are, and as rich as they are culturally and otherwise, only has 7 national heroes. So there is no rush to name a hero every year or every decade or so on. Dr. Gonzalez pointed out yesterday that St. Vincent to date only has 1 national hero. On the other hand, Barbados has 12 national heroes, 2 who are presently alive. But in all of that, people are recognized for their accomplishments. And that is something we have not done very well in Grenada. So with everything that we've done in relation to sports, we only have 4 playing fields that are named after sporting heroes. So people like Jacinta Bartholomew, Janice Celestine, they have Nadika McIntyre. We don't know who they are. And it comes back to the point, are we going to legislate emotion and tell people how they should feel on a particular day, or are we going to educate people and enshrine in them that sense of duty, nationalism, and responsibility? Dr. Bob and your panelists, we knew 2 decades ago we were not celebrating independence as fervently as we are right now, but a lot of work was done to establish as it were, an independent season. So coming right after Christmas, we knew that it was independence. People were taking out the flags, putting up the flags. The songs were played on the radio. We rejuvenated the independence calypso competitions and so on. And the songs have been played. Likewise, Carriacou's Carnival did not just happen that people just decided to go to Carriacou. Work was done. You don't have to legislate those things. A process of education, of infiltration, of almost tricking, if you will, people into understanding who we are as Grenadians and what we should subscribe to. So outside of the economic effect of what was done last Wednesday, I'm puzzled as to whether or not coming out of it, there is a better understanding of and appreciation for what should be Martha's Day or what transpired on the foot 41 years ago. Because the conversation has been the Prime Minister stop events versus this is what happened and this is where the reverence should go. This is where our thoughts should be on the 19th of October. Let me just join the others, and the name was mentioned. A hero, as far as we're concerned, and in a lot of the other islands, a lot of politicians are heroes. The Antiguan heroes list is populated by politicians.
The birds.
Exactly. But in Grenada, because we are so divided politically and it is getting worse, I would caution that we stay away from honoring politicians to begin with. And let us start off safe and neutral. And the safest, most neutral hero, most deserving of hero status is, of course, Kirani James. And there is no rush to populate the list of heroes. Like I said, St. Vincent only has one. Jamaica only has 7. But let us get to the point where we can agree that when we elevate someone to that status, that we are not creating further polarization, that it is something that we can celebrate and we are truly honoring people who are deserving of that status.
And I want to bring back the entire panel on this here. Mr. Claude, I want to begin with you on this question around how we should name and designate our national heroes. Do you agree with Dexter Mitchell's theory of the case here, that it should be non-partisan and that it should begin from a neutral place? Just unmute the mic, sir. Just unmute your microphone. Yes.
Yes, I think I concur with everything Mr. Mitchell has said. It's very, very, very concise, and I think that's the approach we should take, especially with respect to Kirani James. He's a justly celebrated athlete. He has done Grenada proud internationally, and there could be no dispute as to his meritorious award when given. I do concur with you, sir, and accept your reasoning in that regard.
Dr. Marisha, do you agree with that? And I think Mr. Charles would also agree with that. Dr. Marisha,
yes, I agree. I fully agree. But also, I think you ought to determine categories of heroes. For example, in the period of the Revolution, my own grandfather, T.M. Marisha, was named as a national hero. Tubal Rab was Butler, a great union leader that made his impact in Trinidad, was also a national hero. Now, I do not know why people in one period are designated as heroes, and then in another period you just wipe them off the map as if they don't exist anymore.
Yes.
So going forward, we need to establish in an immutable fashion a way that we designate our heroes, and not only that, if there are heroes in this period, there are heroes today, there are heroes in the future.
Yes.
Not this kind of changing all of the time. We already have national heroes and we just erase them. And so if we are going to use the new criteria to designate who are heroes, okay, so we have these new heroes, but they must always be heroes for the present and future generations to know who these people were, what were the contributions to national development, and why they were revered and admired by the Grenadian people to elevate them to that status. I think that's what it should be.
Dennis Charles, Mr. Charles, I'm sure that what everyone is saying here is music to your ears, sir. You can agree with that. I think we have come to a place. We have come to a place of agreement on the Bub report, and maybe that is something that we can replicate throughout the national community.
We got a Mitchell to do that, right?
Who would have thought? I just ate a little breakfast and I would be so happy today for your report, sir. I'm always enlightened when I come here. I look
Yes,
forward
sir.
to coming back. But I love what everyone has said with respect to having it stand the test of time. We don't want to be wishy-washy, just picking somebody for the hell of it because of political reasons or whatever. Everyone knows the contribution of Dr. Maurice, right? During the, trade union, time, the federation and all of that, Urias, Butler. We have many others. We had another one from Grenada who became a second king in Haiti, Henry Christophe.
Henry Christophe, yes.
He's from the area of Sans Souci. And he became because there was a connection between Haiti and Grenada back then. Very, very close connection, culturally too. So if you go back and pick a hero based on merit, right, and not based on politics, then it will stand the test of time. But once you start to play political games, because that runs the then we. But I want attorney.
He will. Yes, I've not forgotten you, sir. I've not forgotten.
I don't want
you.
him
We
to
will,
go.
we will do that. We will do that in the wrap-up segment. We get into wrap up the program shortly, and I'll have him answer that question. But could it be the case? And Dex, I want to throw this out to you first, and then the rest of the panel can respond. Two things can be true at the same time. Yes, we can have politicians like, for example, Dr. Marisho. First of all, I never knew you were related to Tia Marisho. This is news to me. In all my years, I never knew that was your grandfather. Grenadians need to know this history. Yes, but the point is that there are many because Tia Marisho operated in a political space as well. You know, he ran for elections during that period of associated statehood in Grenada. So could it be the case that, yes, there are politicians who, while they may have a sordid past or, sordid legacies, that they can also rise to the place of national hero status, Dexter?
No, I'm not saying that they cannot. I'm just saying that we need to be very careful. I mean, look at the discussion we are having in 2024, and we are having that discussion because we cannot agree on our path forward. Now, let us be honest with ourselves. The two names that would come up as politicians for hero status would be Eric Mattigeri and Maurice Bishop. Now, half of the population would agree, and half of
the other half will not.
Yes. The other conundrum about it is that Bishop is being considered for hero status because he got rid of Gary, and we are going to celebrate Gary as a hero also. So we need a lot of further discussion, and maybe not hero status. Maybe there's a designation just below hero that could be afforded them. Do you want to have people,
which is prescribed in the National Honors Act as well, by the way?
Yes,
exactly. It's there in law. It's there in law. There is the Order of Grenada. You have, the recognition of the Order of Grenada. And I believe there's another one. There's a national awards ceremony that happens every time with independence. So you do have these different types. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to bring that context.
And Mr. Charles mentioned it, that there has to be a honest conversation. People like Mr. Charles and others who were detained between 1979 and 1983, they too have a story to tell, which might be quite opposing to the narrative that enshrines sainthood on Maurice Bishop. The people who suffered on the Gary, with the creation of his mongoose gang and so on, that led to the revolution, they too have a story to tell. So yes, maybe there are things that they did, and we cannot take away from the fact that as a politician, Bishop was very good to Grenada. I mean, look how long it is taking our colleagues in the Windward Islands to have international airports. We were able to open an international airport in 1984. Dominica is just starting to build one. St. Vincent just opened one. Look at what Gary meant to the trade union movement, and he's the father of independence. But maybe they are not heroes in the context that we're trying to establish now, but maybe they're the Order of Grenada or some other designation that allows everybody to be happy and peaceful about this discussion, and somebody who is more neutral, who we think is more deserving of it, who has done much more for the state, somebody like Akira James, and it could only be him for the next 50 years. There is no rush to name any other heroes.
As for example, St. Vincent only has one, as Margaret Francis. Hello, Margaret, as Margaret Francis pointed out. Yes.
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Charles, politicians. So, for example, should Eric Gary be designated a national hero?
In my view, there is no other person born on the island of Grenada or whether it's on the island of Aruba who deserve to be named a national hero. When you look back at where Grenada was in the 1948, 49, 50, 51 era, right? When Gary came back from Aruba, was thrown out, the conditions of the poor, the working poor in Grenada was one cut above below slavery, or if you want to say above slavery. The abuses, the exploitation, they had to go to work without food, without shoes in their feet, with a flambeau in the hand. And all this sabotage they did to Gary during that time. 3 of his supporters were massacred in cold blood, right? You know the whole thing about Sky Red.
Sky Red, yes.
With that on your show. But when you go to the extent, even the British came with a battleship. And as you know, they do most of the African leaders.
And
right?
he was arrested, and yes.
Brought to Carriacou, they could have jumped, let him out in Pickham Jenny and tell him swim to Union Island or something. Just kill him. They had no reason to bring him back, but more plantation was, being burnt. So they brought him back to put peace and quiet. And of course, later on, well, he started with trade unionism, but later on he segued into politics. So if you look at that, he brought the first female governor in the whole eastern region, Caribbean region, or Lesser Antilles, right? With Dame Hilda Bino. We had the first Miss World, Black, right? Miss World, beauty contestant. We had many, many things. He got us associated statehood. He built over 30 schools and clinics and all of that. Grenadians got scholarship. I won a national scholarship from Sir Ignacio Gary. I didn't take it because my father hated him, right? I went to McDonald College. Instead, I was supposed to go to Presentation Brothers College. I did not, okay? So what I'm saying, and then we got independence, right? In 1974. Bishop can't even come 10% close to what Gary accomplished. Land redistribution, if you want to call it land for the landless, right? And so forth. Then he had this self-help concept where communities could come together, just like Kit Mitchell had debushing, patch holes in the road, cut the grass, open drains when water clog it and all of that. All around the country, self-help, right? People coming together and build, or they make a maroon. You cook a little food, dumpling and peas with a little piece of salt beef, and they put your sugar cane, because you don't have money to pay them to have a sugar cane. In my neck of the woods, I'm from close to Rivanto Estate. So all of that stuff, self-help, coming together and all of that under Gary. When the night came for the independence, they sabotaged the electricity in town. And who was keen on making sure Grenada does not get independent? Robert Blaze, Ben Jones, the opposition, and Maurice Bishop. How then could you fly a drone with Maurice Bishop the same night when you're supposed to be honoring Gary for gaining our independence? Nothing but color worship. The worship of European features. I mean, this is just crazy to me. I don't understand it. Bishop can't even come close to what Gary delivered to the people of Grenada. He is not the father of independence. He's the father of our nation. Period.
Yes, absolutely.
And he didn't build any prison. He did not build any prison.
Yes.
Remember that Bishop built a prison.
Yes. Mr. Clouden, the idea of a politician serving as or being given the high honor of national hero status.
Dr. Bob, I have no difficulty with that. He should be judged on the contribution he has made to national development. For example, look at Dr. Eric Williams in Trinidad. He has done a tremendous job in developing Trinidad and providing a level of political stability for well over 20 years. The concept of selecting a hero or selecting one for a meritorious order must be based on his national contribution. How has he enhanced the development of the polity, the country? And I think politicians are not should not be exempted. I agree with Mr. Charles when he said that Prime Minister Gary has made a tremendous contribution to the development of Grenada, but so has Maurice Bishop. So, you have to put things in balance. So has Karani James. And so with future men who sacrifice their lives and make a contribution towards national development, they also should be awarded some form of recognition. Put it that way.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And I think we know what Dr. Marisho's answer would be as well. Here, Dr. Marisho, national politicians is a.
I personally don't have a problem with that,
Yes.
I don't want to get into a contention with Mr. Charles, but if I go to name the litany of achievements that were chalked up under the Bishop government, I'll be talking for the rest of the day. So let's also understand that not all national heroes are perfect people. We are human beings. We have our flaws. We have our fallacies. So, if we're going to just focus on the flaws that people have, then we probably would never name national heroes in the true sense of the word. But politicians, like anybody else, can be designated as heroes. Labor leaders, artists, calypsonians. You could go along. But again, there has to be a national consultation in determining the categories, or even determining, like in other countries, whether you want to have one or two national heroes. This has to be an open debate. And, right now we actually are engaging in that kind of debate. So this is what has to be broadened in the community, in the country as a whole, so that we can actually discuss these items, discuss these ideas, and finally, come to some kind of consensus in the country as to who our national heroes are. Of course, not everybody's going to agree with everybody, but once we have settled on the criteria and we have determined who these national heroes are going to be, that should be immutable. You should not be able to change it at any time again in our history.
And that is why history is so important. And speaking of history, and of course, we're going up to a break, gentlemen, and we'll be coming to close the program very shortly. Sometimes I give book recommendations on the program, but in my free time, I am currently reading, in addition to the list I published before, Survival of Service, my experiences as Governor General of Grenada. There are some very, very fascinating anecdotes that Sir Paul Schoon, the late Sir Paul Schoon, former Governor General of Grenada, writes here in respect of the revolutionary experience and as his time as Governor General following the collapse of the Grenada Revolution. So I think this is a piece of literature that everyone should get. And of course, the other one, because I always like going down on a journey of discovery, is the Gary Movement. The Gary Movement. That book was published by one George Griffith, and that was published. George Griffith, he said, quote, "When the coup began in March 1979, George Griffith was the permanent representative to the United Nations, ambassador for the United States, an alternate representative to the OAS. A graduate of 3 universities, he was a high official in the Gary administration and Grenada's first resident high commissioner in Canada and a delegate to the UN General Assembly." Now, the reason why I bring these two books up, because I find that in these two books, again, this is not a lecture. I promise not to get into professor mode this morning. But these two books, a lot of the themes in these two books reflects a lot of what George Brizan articulated in Grenada Island of Conflict. And again, I just want to highlight a comment made by Mr. D. Riggs in the chat, and he said, man, we are bitterly divided as a society. And I think, maybe that's just one of the features of Grenadian society. And perhaps during our wrap-up, folks, gentlemen, we're going to have a conversation. How do we close the bitter divide that continues to exist in our Grenadian society? So, folks, what we will do, we will take a quick break and come back for the final segment. As we go to break, I will be going down memory lane a little bit, and let us see if you know this person who will be coming up on the screen. So let's take a look.
Did you see a copy of the judgment that was handed down against them at the trial? And the second question is, do you know exactly why you were prevented from seeing your clients as denied by the state? Do you have any particular... Is it legal?
To date, in all honesty, I cannot imagine an attorney at law on legitimate business being denied access to his client. I can't imagine, but it was done. The planet that I live on tells me that every person is entitled to his or her legal representative. And I cannot, as an attorney at law who took an oath, I cannot envision what will fuel an authority to deny persons access to their attorneys. Yes.
The trial that was held, are you saying that the judgment coming out of that trial was therefore illegitimate?
Well, not the...
On also another issue as well. It is said that at that particular trial, none of the persons gave any testimonies. They refused to testify at the kangaroo court. It was said that it was said.
I will not want to go into the second issue because it may impinge on what is to come shortly, and please don't rush me. It's coming. I assure you it's coming. However, we are not the judgment. We are arguing on a specific part of the judgment, and that is purely the sentencing of the consecutive terms by the judge with respect to the three. So we pigeonholed it into that little cube, and we kept it that. Just one.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to the Bub Report. Of course, that was a press conference held there by attorney Keith Scotland. Of course, Keith Scotland represented the Grenada 17 in their criminal trial. The Grenada 17 versus the state of Grenada. Of course, that particular press conference, that was back in 2002, I believe it was, when the court ordered their release. I was a young reporter at the time, and I say that, age brings wisdom, I suppose. I no longer use persons in vocabulary, so I think I've come a long way, and now I also have a lot of hair. But gentlemen, I want to bring you all back as we close this conversation with this question. And as we close, is division embedded within the DNA of Grenadian society? Because we have seen in the context of this issue where many divisions bubbled up to the surface around the National Heroes Day designation. Mr. Clouden, I want to begin with you. And how do we get beyond those divisions?
Well, we have to do it. We have to do it through inculcation of certain values, cultural values, norms, and mores that we have grown accustomed to over the years. Now, we have had a very truncated history of colonial domination, which has had psychological effects on us. I mean, going back to history, as you rightly said, history is best qualified to reward all research. And we find that during the brutal years of slavery, it was customary to put one against the other. You have, Massa would have privileged slaves, house slaves, and of course the rebels were the field slaves. And you had that dichotomy and that disunity. That is psychological, and it would take generations to dispel it. How could it be done? Through certain legislative instruments, the constitution that emerges from the people, the inculcation of values, a change value system where we stop admiring the mulattoes, mustifinos, and we elevate the sambos and the quadroons. So, it's a historical process, and it comes through evolution. We are on the right path. Let me say so. We have harmonized our legislation. We have an OECS Supreme Court, which tried to harmonize legislation, and possibly in some future, in futuro, we may have a federation, which Terry's grandfather became a star player in the defunct Caribbean Federation at large. So that, yes, George Beaton spoke of it. As a matter of fact, Dr. Bob, if you look at that book by George Griffith in 1977, there's a picture with me and Sir Eric and others in Ottawa. If you look at the Ottawa pictures, you will see there with Diali, Freddie Diali, Georgie Saltisick, George Griffith, a fellow from Montreal came up, Selou's father, Tatix. And I was at law school down in Ottawa. And
yes, there is a young Anselm Clown right there.
That's me right there, Dr. Bob. So that I've had my feet wet from the Grandmaster himself.
Yes.
So look, we have to unite, and when we have these national disasters such as Beryl that devastated Carriacou, it is admirable the way Grenadians united and came to our rescue. The Prime Minister visited on a number of occasions, and he's doing everything, and the government is doing everything to make the lives of Carriacouans and Petite Martinicans as tolerable as possible. So that this is an instance. We have a national disaster, and we bind together. It was Herbert Blaise who said and called on the Lord to bind us together. There is need for togetherness, and the sad thing is, politically, we're so divisive. We have to try to overcome that. And it can only be overcome through education and the inculcation of new norms and mores for the development of a young nation, so to speak.
And as the revolution said, education is liberation. On that score, Dr. Marichal, let me bring you in here for some closing comments. And while you do reflect on this whole question of how do we really, quell this division that exists in the society?
Sure. I don't believe that the DNA, that the division is embedded in our DNA. I certainly believe that we have been shaped by our history over the years. And a lot of the division has been created by politics. There's no question that the Gary era created division. No doubt the Bishop era created divisions as well. The NNP and NDC, today there's so much tribalism in the country, there's a lot of division, whether it is intra-party division or extra-party divisions. We are a polarized society, and it is all because of the kind of history that we have shared as a people over the years. In the final analysis, we are a beautiful people. We are understanding people. Even after the excesses of 1983, not a single one of the people who committed the most atrocious crimes against the Grenadian people have ever been hurt or damaged in any way. A lot of the people in the Gary era who committed a lot of atrocities, nobody ended up taking vigilante action or any kind of serious recriminations against them. I think the real problem here in the society is communication, and also to listen to people and to respect people's opinions, irrespective of your political affiliation, your religious thoughts, whatever it is. If we are a little bit more tolerant to each other, if we listen a little bit more and try to avoid confrontation, try to listen to the things that other people are saying. Sometimes you might think that person is wrong, it might not necessarily be. But more tolerance is needed in society. more dialogue, and certainly that coming together, as we know, as a people, we can do. We have done it in the past. In the period of revolution, even though Mr. Charles doesn't agree, but that was a period of greatest national pride and unity that you had ever seen. The crime rate was down. People were already united around a leader. When he talks about a leader that about leaders and whatever, I can tell you that people rallied around Maurice Bishop and his leadership. There's no question about that. I mean, the evidence is there to see. And so we're not trying to vilify anybody, but we are just saying that we need to learn from our history. The time has come where we need to learn from our history. We need to name who our national heroes are so that people can elevate them and look up to them and emulate them. And we need to also, as a people, come together in the national interest. We have been divided for far too long. We have shown the potential that we have as a people. We demonstrate that in the period of revolution as no other time in our history. And if we can do that again, come together. Hopefully, the kind of leader, I mean, even though we have problems with the ruling party, but we need to come together again. Everybody is not perfect. And if we can do that as a people, I don't think there's anything that can stop us. A people united can never be defeated. You must always remember that.
All right. Let me bring in Mr. Charles on the heels of Dr. Mr. Charles and Dr. Marichal. This is my commitment. Hopefully, the next time I'm in Grenada and you are there in Grenada next summer, if life permits, gentlemen, I would like to take the both of you to lunch. That's the Bob Report treat to both of you, so we can literally have a meeting of the minds. I really want to bring.
I have no problem.
Because here is the thing, and again, this program is all about the guests. It's not about me. But I do hear still a lot of hurt, Dr. Marichal, a lot of trauma in Mr. Charles's voice. And that ought not to be discounted. People's feelings are valid. Yes? But I just wanted to make that point before we bring in Mr. Charles. So, Mr. Charles, go ahead, sir.
Yes. Again, Dr. Bob and Dr. Marichal, Attorney Clouden, and I think it's Mr. Joseph.
Mr. Mitchell.
Mitchell, okay, thank you.
No relation to Deacon Mitchell, Honorable Deacon Mitchell or Dr. Honorable Keith Mitchell.
I want to thank you guys and commend you on I think a very good show today, truthful and honest, coming from the heart. It seems as though myself and Dr. Marichal have a lot of understanding today, very, very cordial, although there are some differences where, if I should point out, talking about, coming together and all of that, I agree. But also I would like to inform him that during the period of the revolution, according to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, if you look at Attorney Lloyd Noel, over 3,000 detainees were rounded up and wrongfully jailed by Maurice Bishop. So I don't know what is the loving and heroic thing about that with that kind of atrocities. I want to remind you too about the gang rape. I'm going to give you the names that you can go and investigate. The raping of female detainees. There was a gentleman by the name of Victor Husbands that for 5-6 days, when some of the detainees had a monthly cycle, refused to give them sanitary napkin and tell them go and take cocoa leaf to put for pads. I mean, if I were to go on, you would cry. I want to meet you in person to talk with you. We could eat oil down and take a drink of Marby or something. But there is so much you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know. All right? So trust me, I have done my homework. I have interviewed just about everybody there is to interview. Let me just remind you of a gentleman called Lester Redhead. I forgave him. I sent Dr. Bob a little quotation from Bernard Coates' book when he admitted to the collective paranoia during the revolution. I mean, they assassinated the character of everybody. I was in a Budlal gang, Buck and the Buccaneers, all kind of foolishness, right? Not true. They know it's not true. But Bernard Coates came out, bless his soul, and I call him Comrade Cord for speaking the truth. Finally, in his book, go read it. that even what is said about Kennedy Boudlal, the #1 counter-revolutionary from Tivoli, a lot of those things were not true, and Kennedy was talking the truth to them. There's a lot you don't know. I would like to educate you a little bit. And the young lady who spoke before about the bones of Maurice Bishop, I wonder if she ever thought about looking for the bones of Strand Philip or Ethelbert John, who died in prison, Richmond Hill, in the Raymond Yard. I was there in front of his son, while his other son was in Hopeville. I wonder if you guys ever visited Hopeville and see what Maurice Bishop did to the Rastas. Forced labor, beating, atrocities, all kind of stuff. They tortured them down there in the brutal hot sun, in a cattle pen. Crimes against humanity. If that was out in the public, they would be in the Hague right now. So when you want to glorify and lift Bishop, I don't know, on the left hand of God the Father, Jesus Christ is on the right hand of God the Father, Maurice Bishop on the left as a leftist, I don't think you know what you're talking about, because you guys have never gone up and interviewed the victims of the revolution with the torture, electric shock, beating them up and sticking them with truth serum, drugs to hallucinate them so they come like PDD or Michael Jackson or something, under blows. Brenda Phillip from La Poterie, she died. Dr. Japal Head was flushing a toilet and they sodomized him with a broomstick. If you want to know about atrocities, the 4 victims in Plains, the Stanislas brothers, Steve Lalsey and Andrew Courtney, we went to McDonald College together with me. Me and Steve, we were in the same class, good friends too. Assassinated by PRA soldiers during the Glorious Revolution, and they put it on the people of Monkridge and brutalized the people of Monkridge just like they did the people of Tivoli. I'm from Tivoli. So when you talk, you must make sense. And if you don't know fact, investigate. So I just want to close.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm going to close right now. I still want Mr. Clouden to address some of the families are going to do something about the wrongful death of the children or brothers or whatever, families, at the hands of PRA soldiers. But I want to say something else. What happened to Strand Philip, whose execution, or murder, if you will, was set up by Maurice Bishop in his house in St. Paul's? What about Ralphie, who they poisoned? I saw him, I was the last detainee to see him on his hospital bed. He got black and he shrank like a prune. I was about 3 cell doses from Ralphie. We used to call him Tough Tough. I mean, if I want to go on here, I'll be talking for 2 days.
And we do not have the time, sir.
We don't have the time. But my book is coming out.
Yes.
Forward Ever, The Unmaking of a Revolution. I also call it Under Heavy Manners. And I would document some of the crimes committed by PRA soldiers, and you would get sick to your stomach. So if that period is good for you and glorious for you and all of that, something is wrong. I give up.
And that is why balance matters and different perspectives matters, and that's what we try to do. Dexter, over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Bob, and thank you for the privilege of being on this panel today. Very informative, very interesting program, very necessary program as we are learning. Let me just say, the way forward, I subscribe to the thoughts of Mr. Clouden, education and inculcation. I think moving forward, we cannot leave these things up to chance. I mean, we hear Dr. Marisha and we hear Mr. Charles, and we know how deep-seated things are, how far from some kind of general consensus we are. But we have to educate, we have to get information and educate, especially the younger population, those who are responsible for making decisions right now and for making decisions in the future. We have to arm them with information from the past so that they make the correct decisions, so that we are not having these discussions about whether October 19th should be Martyr Day or Heroes Day or Remembrance Day and so on. Also inculcation, and for everything else that the revolution might have been, one of the things it did very well was some positive inculcation. You spoke about, Dr. Bob, education is liberation, eat what you grow what you eat. And in a very short period of time, the revolution was able to establish nationalism, a sense of pride, So, I hear Mr. Charles and everything that he said, but there was some positives too, and that was that realization that the enforcement of positive messaging can result in positive actions, and we started during the revolution. So formal education, backed up by facts, not by hearsay or emotions, and not legislating emotions, not legislating how people should feel, but formal education that will determine our way forward, and inculcation using positive messaging, the reinforcement of positive messaging, reinstilling that pride, so that we are not identified by green or by yellow or by one set of ends versus another set of ends, but by the nationalism and the Grenadianism that we've come to enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, I mean, I don't mean to be a pessimist, but perhaps I'm a realist. This, you know, this green and yellow thing is not going to go away. I mean, anytime soon, you know. Unfortunately, that's the reality, but that's where we are, and we have to, I guess, figure out how to manage those deeply entrenched divisions that we have in the society, because I just think it's just very difficult to have conversations when that is always the starting point. Well, she's an NP, he's an NDC, he's green, yellow, whatever it is. And it makes it very difficult for those things to happen. But again, platforms like this, what we try to do here is to educate the national community on the issues that matter. So hopefully we can always have a meeting of the minds on the Bub Report where we can all agree to disagree in a very civil way. So gentlemen, thank you for appearing on this week's edition of the Bub Report. I am your humble host, Dr. Kellan Bub, thanking everyone for tuning in to this week's edition of the program. Now later, I will be running a pre-recorded live stream of a previous documentary that I produced back in 2002 on the Grenada Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There was a Grenada Truth and Reconciliation Commission, of which the current Attorney General, Senator the Honorable Claudia Joseph, sat on that commission. And if you want to learn more about this, you can tune into our YouTube page, as well as our Facebook page at 5 p.m. this evening for that live stream. But on behalf of the producers of the Bub Report, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellan Bub, wishing everyone a pleasant week ahead. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.
We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, we have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style. And so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
This is a very interesting question.
The Bub Reports with Dr. Kellan Bub. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.